People noticed her before they understood her. Whenever she walked through the settlement corridor, voices lowered. Footsteps slowed or hurried away. Doors closed a little faster than usual. It was not because she had ever harmed anyone. It was because she looked different, moved differently, and stayed quiet in a place where fear filled the silence. Over time, fear became her shadow. The settlement was built for humans first. Straight halls, bright white lights, sharp corners, everything designed for comfort and control. She did not fit that design. Her height, her posture, the way her eyes reflected light, all of it marked her as other. No signs warned people to stay away from her, yet everyone did. Fear spread without words. The human man saw her for the first time during a routine supply shift. He had been carrying a crate when the crowd ahead suddenly split in two, like water around a stone. He nearly collided with her because he was not watching closely. He stopped just in time. She stopped too. For a brief moment, they stood facing each other. Around them, people froze. Some pretended to check their devices. Others turned away. A few stepped back, as if danger might leap out of thin air. She did nothing. She simply waited. The human man felt his heart beat faster, but not from fear. It was surprise. He had expected something dramatic, some sign that would explain the tension. There was none. She stood calmly, her expression unreadable, her hands relaxed at her sides. Whatever people feared, it was not happening now. He nodded once, a small and natural gesture, then shifted the crate to let her pass. She inclined her head in return and walked on. That was all. No sound, no threat, no warning. Yet behind him he heard someone whisper that he was careless. Another voice said he was lucky. Someone else muttered that he should be more careful next time. He did not respond. He finished his shift, but his thoughts kept returning to that moment. He tried to understand what everyone else had seen that he had not. Over the following days, he began to notice patterns. She always sat alone in common areas. When she entered a room, conversations ended. When she reached for something on a shelf, others stepped away, even if it meant waiting longer. No one was openly cruel. There were no insults or threats. It was quieter than that. Polite distance. Silent rejection. The human man had seen this kind of behavior before, long before the settlement existed. He remembered cities on Earth, places where people judged first and asked questions never. He remembered how fear could grow without reason, fed only by rumor and difference. The setting had changed. Human behavior had not. He started paying attention to details. She followed rules carefully. She waited her turn. She avoided eye contact, not out of aggression, but caution. It seemed as if she had learned that the less space she took, the safer things became. That knowledge did not come from nowhere. One day, he found himself in the same food hall as her. The space was half empty. He took his tray and scanned for a seat. Most tables were occupied by groups. Only one table had space, the one near her. She sat at the far end, her meal untouched. He paused. He felt the weight of unseen eyes on his back. He knew what people expected him to do. They expected him to choose inconvenience over discomfort. Distance over curiosity. He chose the seat. He sat down slowly, leaving enough space to be respectful, not invading. He did not stare. He did not speak right away. He simply ate. For several minutes, nothing happened. The room felt louder than before, even though fewer people were talking. He could sense attention without looking up. She turned her head slightly. Her gaze rested on him, steady and calm. Not angry, not surprised. Something else, harder to name. Finally, she spoke. "Everyone is afraid of me. But why are not you fearful of me, human?" Her voice was clear and controlled, carrying no threat. It was a question asked many times in her mind, now finally given sound. The human man swallowed his food and set his utensil down. He did not rush to answer. He thought about the question, not about what would sound right, but what was true. He said that he did not see a reason to be afraid. He said fear usually came from stories, not experience. He said she had done nothing to him. She watched his face closely, as if checking for hidden signs. When she spoke again, her tone softened. Others say the same at first. Then they hear things. Then they leave. He shrugged slightly. He admitted that people often preferred stories over reality because stories were easier. Reality required effort. She was silent after that. She looked down at her meal, then back at him. Slowly, she began to eat. They did not talk much more that day. They did not need to. The moment itself carried weight. Around them, people pretended not to notice, but the tension had changed. Something unfamiliar had entered the room. Normal behavior. In the days that followed, they crossed paths more often. Sometimes they exchanged brief words. Sometimes only a nod. Each interaction was simple and calm. There were no grand conversations, no sudden friendship. Trust did not arrive quickly. It arrived carefully. The human man learned that fear could be loud even when no one spoke. He also learned that silence could be a shield. The alien woman had learned to wear that shield well. It protected her, but it also kept her alone. Others continued to avoid her. Some watched the human man with confusion. A few with quiet judgment. No one confronted him. Fear rarely likes open discussion, but he did not think of himself as brave. He did not feel like he was doing something important. To him, it felt normal. Treating someone like a person did not seem like an act of courage. Yet in that place, it was. One evening, as lights dimmed to signal rest hours, they stood near a window that looked out into open space. Stars spread endlessly beyond the glass. She spoke again. Quietly. Fear changes how others see me. Sometimes it changes how I see myself. He understood that feeling more than he expected. He said that fear often lied, but people believed it because it spoke loudly. He said that silence did not mean weakness. She did not reply right away. She looked out at the stars, then nodded once. It was a small gesture, but it carried meaning. That was how it began. Not with conflict or spectacle, but with observation and choice. One human decided not to follow the current of fear. One alien woman noticed. The world did not change that day. The settlement remained cautious. Rumors still moved quietly through corridors, but something real had started. Something human. After that first real conversation, things did not suddenly become easy. The settlement did not wake up kinder the next day. People did not forget their fear overnight. What changed was smaller, quieter, but important. Awareness had begun. The alien woman noticed that the human man no longer avoided places where she might appear. He did not seek her out in an obvious way either. He simply existed near her without tension. That alone felt strange to her. Most humans either stayed far away or acted overly careful, as if one wrong word might trigger danger. He did neither. The next time they spoke was near a water station. She was filling a container slowly, making sure not to spill. He waited behind her without rushing. Others came, saw who stood there, and chose another station instead. She glanced back at him. "You do not mind waiting," she said. He replied that waiting was part of life. He said rushing usually caused more problems. She considered this, then said that many people rushed to judge her too. He agreed. He said people often filled empty space with fear because it gave them a sense of control. If they labeled something as dangerous, they felt prepared, even if they were wrong. She asked him if he had ever been feared like that. He paused before answering. He said not in the same way, but he had been misunderstood before. He said humans were not strangers to that feeling. Different places, different faces, same behavior. She finished filling her container and stepped aside. Instead of leaving immediately, she stayed. This small choice mattered more than words. It meant she was willing to continue. They walked together for a short distance. Not close enough to draw attention, not far enough to feel distant. The corridor lights flickered softly above them. She asked him why he spoke to her at all, why he chose to sit near her when others would not, why he answered her question instead of making excuses. He said he had noticed how alone she was. He said loneliness changed people in quiet ways. He said fear isolated both sides, the one who fears and the one who is feared. She told him that isolation was safer. Alone meant fewer risks. He replied that safety without connection felt empty. He admitted that humans often feared emptiness more than danger. She stopped walking. He stopped too. She said that humans feared her because of things they could not understand. Her strength, her silence, her species' history. None of it was her choice. He said that humans had done the same to their own kind for centuries. Different skin, different beliefs, different accents. Fear always found an excuse. Her expression changed slightly. Not soft, but thoughtful. From that day, their conversations grew longer. Not frequent, but meaningful. They spoke about simple things. Work schedules, food preferences, the strange way humans decorated living spaces, the way silence felt different to her species. Dottie learned that her people valued restraint. Loud emotions were considered dangerous where she came from. Control was survival. To humans, her calm looked cold. To her, it was discipline. She learned that humans filled silence because they were afraid of what thoughts might surface. Noise kept fear distracted. Sometimes they talked while walking. Sometimes while standing apart. Sometimes while sitting in shared spaces where others watched from a distance. People began to notice patterns. The human man was not harmed. He was not threatened. He did not disappear. Slowly, curiosity replaced some of the fear, but not enough to change behavior yet. One evening, she asked him a question that carried weight. "If you are not afraid of me, what do you see when you look at me?" He did not answer right away. He studied her posture, the way she held herself like someone used to being ready for trouble. He saw weariness beneath control. He said he saw someone tired of being judged. Someone careful because the world had taught her to be. Someone who wanted peace more than power. She looked away after that. Her voice was quiet when she spoke again. "That no one has ever described me that way." He said that fear often erased detail. It turned people into shapes instead of individuals. That night, she told him something she had never shared with a human before. When she first arrived at the settlement, she had tried to greet others openly. She had learned human gestures and phrases. The reactions were immediate: fear, distance, surveillance, warnings. Over time, she learned to withdraw. The more silent she became, the safer others felt. The safer they felt, the lonelier she became. The human man listened without interrupting. He did not offer solutions. He knew some pain did not need fixing, only recognition. He said that humans often feared what they could not control. Her presence reminded them of how small they were in a larger universe. She said that her presence was not meant to threaten. She came to observe, to learn, to coexist. He smiled slightly and said that humans struggled with coexistence even among themselves. Their conversations were not dramatic. No raised voices. No emotional outbursts. That was what made them real. Two beings sharing understanding slowly, without expectation. Others in the settlement began to whisper different things. Some said the human man was foolish. Some said he was reckless. A few quietly wondered if they had been wrong. One day, a minor incident occurred in a crowded area. Equipment malfunctioned, causing sparks and alarms. People panicked. In the chaos, someone fell near the alien woman. Without hesitation, she moved. She lifted debris with controlled strength and shielded the fallen person from further harm. Her actions were precise and careful. The alarm stopped. The danger passed. The crowd stared. She stepped back immediately, lowering her gaze, expecting fear to surge again. Instead, there was silence. Uncertain, heavy silence. The human man approached her side calmly. He asked if she was hurt. She shook her head. The person she had helped was already being attended to. No one thanked her. No one accused her either. Was not acceptance. But it was different. Later, she told him that moments like that frightened her more than rejection. Uncertainty meant the old rules no longer worked, he said. Change often felt unsafe before it felt right. She asked him if he thought humans could ever stop being afraid of her. He said fear rarely disappeared completely, but understanding could weaken it. One interaction at a time. She considered this. She said that perhaps fear did not need to vanish. Perhaps it only needed to stop deciding everything. He agreed. As days passed, their connection became known, though unspoken. People adjusted routes. Some watched from afar. A few began to nod politely at her, testing their own courage. The human man understood that progress did not look heroic. It looked slow. It looked uncomfortable. It looked like quiet conversations that no one celebrated. She understood that being seen did not mean being fully accepted. But it was a beginning. One evening, she said something that stayed with him. You are not fearless. You are just willing to look longer than others. He realized she was right. He was not immune to fear. He simply chose not to let it speak first. That was what set him apart. Not strength. Not bravery. Choice. And for her, that choice made all the difference. As time passed, their quiet connection became harder for others to ignore. It was no longer just two figures crossing paths by chance. It became routine. They stood near each other during shared announcements. They walked the same corridors at similar hours. They exchanged short words that carried comfort rather than caution. The settlement noticed, even if no one spoke openly about it. Some people began to watch the alien woman more closely, not with pure fear this time, but with confusion. Their old image of her did not match what they were seeing now. She was not violent. She was not hostile. She followed rules more carefully than most. Yet fear is stubborn. It does not leave easily, even when evidence stands in front of it. The human man felt the shift too. He noticed how people looked at him when he stood beside her. Some eyes carried warning. Others carried silent questions. A few carried something close to relief, as if his presence made her feel less unknown. He understood then that he had become a bridge without meaning to. And bridges are often stepped on before they are appreciated. One afternoon, while maintenance crews worked nearby, they sat on opposite sides of a wide bench. Tools clanged in the distance. The sound filled the air between them. She spoke first. They talk about you now, he asked. What they said. She replied that some believed he was brave. Some believed he was foolish. Others believed he had no sense of danger. She said all of them were wrong. He smiled lightly and said humans loved labels because labels save time. Thinking deeply took effort. She asked if the attention bothered him. He answered honestly. He said sometimes it did. Being judged for kindness felt strange. But he also said he would rather be misunderstood for doing something right than praised for doing nothing. She absorbed that quietly. Then she asked a question that surprised him. Do you ever feel afraid of becoming like them? He knew what she meant. Afraid of letting fear guide his actions. Afraid of choosing comfort over conscience, he said yes. He said fear was persuasive. It spoke in familiar tones. It promised safety and belonging. But it also demanded silence and distance. She nodded. She said fear made similar promises to her people long ago. That was how wars began. Not with hatred, but with fear dressed as protection. That was the first time she spoke of her past beyond surface details. She told him that her species once believed isolation was the only way to survive. They avoided others. They built defenses instead of relationships. Over generations, this fear hardened into tradition. By the time they realized isolation was killing them slowly, it was already part of who they were. He listened carefully. He did not interrupt. He knew this was not just history. It was memory. She said she had volunteered to come to human space because she believed coexistence mattered. She believed contact could heal what isolation had broken. Instead, she found the same fear wearing different faces. He said humans often repeated the same mistakes with different language. Progress changed tools, not instincts. As they talked, a group of humans passed nearby. Their conversation paused when they noticed her. One of them hesitated, then gave a short nod in her direction. It was awkward, unsure, but real. She noticed it too. That small moment stayed with her longer than she expected. Later that cycle, something happened that tested everything they had built. A false alert echoed through the settlement. Lights dimmed. Security barriers lowered automatically. People panicked before understanding what was happening. Panic moved faster than logic. In the confusion, the alien woman found herself surrounded by nervous humans in a narrow corridor. Their fear sharpened. Some stepped back. Someone shouted to keep distance. She froze. The human man saw it from across the corridor. He saw the tension coil around her like a trap. He moved forward, steady and visible. He raised his voice, not in command, but in calm. It is a system error, he said. Stay where you are. Breathe. His words did not fix everything, but they slowed the spiral. Security soon confirmed the alert was false. Barriers lifted. The corridor loosened. When people dispersed, she remained still. Her hands trembled slightly. Though she tried to hide it. He stayed with her. She said quietly that moments like that reminded her why fear ruled decisions. She said it took only seconds for understanding to disappear. He said fear erased memory first. That was why people forgot who she really was when pressure rose. She asked him how he remained calm. He answered truthfully. He said he focused on the present moment, on what was actually happening, not what might happen. She said her people were trained the same way. Yet fear still crept in. He said fear was not failure. Letting fear decide was. That night, she did not return to her quarters immediately. She stood near the observation window again. The stars looked distant, cold, and endless. She said something she had never admitted aloud. Sometimes I wonder if being understood is worth the pain of trying. He did not answer quickly. He knew this was not a question seeking comfort. It was a question seeking truth. He said being misunderstood hurt deeply, but being unseen hurt longer. He said isolation numbed pain, but it also numbed hope. She closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, something had shifted. Over the following weeks, small changes appeared across the settlement. Nothing official. Nothing announced. A human technician asked her a work-related question instead of rerouting around her. A food server placed her tray without hesitation. A security officer spoke to her directly rather than through a device. These moments were uneven. Some days felt hopeful. Others felt heavy. Progress moved forward, then slipped back. The human man remained constant, but constancy had a cost. He began to feel the strain of standing between fear and understanding. Some humans stopped speaking to him as openly as before. A few warned him privately to be careful. One told him he was risking too much for someone who might never belong. That comment stayed with him. He asked her one evening if she ever felt like she did not belong anywhere. She answered without hesitation. Everywhere. He nodded. He said belonging was often conditional. As long as you behaved the way others expected, you were welcome. The moment you challenged fear, you became uncomfortable. She said her presence challenged fear just by existing. He agreed. That was when she said something unexpected. Then perhaps my role is not to be accepted. Perhaps it is to reveal. Reveal what? He asked. She said reveal how fear shaped behavior. Reveal who chose to question it. Reveal who hid behind it. He realized she was right. Her existence exposed more about humans than about her species. One cycle later, during a shared gathering, she stood slightly closer to the group than usual. She did not speak, but she did not withdraw either. The human man stood nearby, not as protection, but as presence. No one panicked. Some were uneasy. Some avoided eye contact. But no one fled. It was not victory, but it was progress. That night, she said she was beginning to understand humans better. Not because they were kind, but because they were afraid. And fear made them predictable. He said understanding did not mean accepting everything. It meant choosing responses carefully. She looked at him and said that his choice had changed more than he realized. He asked how. She said because one human willing to stand without fear made others question their own. And once fear was questioned, it was no longer absolute. That realization marked a turning point. Not loud, not traumatic, but real. By the time the fourth phase of their story unfolded, the settlement felt different, even if no one could clearly explain why. Fear still existed, but it no longer filled every space. It lingered instead of ruling. That shift came with new challenges, ones that were quieter but heavier. The alien woman began to notice something new. People were no longer only afraid of her. Some were uncomfortable in a different way. Her presence had stopped being invisible. That attention carried weight. When she walked through corridors now, a few heads lifted instead of turning away. Some people watched her closely, trying to understand rather than escape. Others looked conflicted, caught between old instincts and new evidence. This confused her more than fear ever had. Fear had rules. Attention did not. The human man noticed it too. He saw how she carried herself more carefully, not because she feared harming others, but because she feared disappointing them. Expectations had quietly replaced avoidance. One evening, as they stood near the edge of a shared space, she spoke with a heaviness he had not heard before. Being feared was easier, she said. I knew where I stood. He asked what she meant. She explained that when people feared her, they stayed away. Their reactions were predictable. Now some expected her to be calm, patient, understanding, even forgiving. She said that being seen as a symbol was another kind of isolation. He understood immediately. Humans did this often. They replaced fear with expectation, and both denied individuality. He told her that progress sometimes created new pressure. When people changed their views, they often expected those who endured fear to carry the burden of growth. She said she was tired. That admission mattered. She rarely spoke about her limits. Strength had been assumed of her for too long. As days passed, small tensions began to surface in the settlement. Disagreements during meetings. Sharp words over resource distribution. Stress that had always existed now searched for an outlet. Fear, when weakened, often tried to transform into blame. Some began whispering again. Not openly, but carefully. They questioned whether the change was happening too fast, whether trust was being given too easily, whether the alien woman was influencing behavior in ways they could not control. The human man heard fragments of these conversations. He recognized the pattern. When fear lost power, it looked for all eyes. He did not tell her everything he heard. He knew how easily words could reopen wounds. But one day, she sensed the distance in his voice. She asked him directly if people were turning against her again. He hesitated, then chose honesty. He said some people were uncomfortable with change. He said fear did not like losing its place. He said she was not the problem, but she had become a mirror. She was silent for a long time after that. Then she said something that surprised him. "I do not want you to defend me anymore." He looked at her, confused. She explained that she did not want her presence to be justified by his courage. She said she needed to stand on her own, even if it meant standing alone again for a while. He felt a mix of pride and concern. He asked if she was sure. She said she had spent too long surviving reactions. She wanted to live honestly, even if honesty caused discomfort. From that point, she began to act differently. Not aggressively, not defiantly, simply openly. She spoke during meetings when her expertise was relevant. She asked questions without softening her tone. She corrected misunderstandings calmly, even when it made others uneasy. Some responded well, others did not. One incident stood out. During a planning session, a human coordinator questioned her assessment of structural safety. The challenge was sharp, edged with doubt. The room fell silent. In the past, she would have withdrawn. This time, she explained her reasoning clearly. She provided evidence. She remained calm. The coordinator listened, then nodded. The correction was accepted. No applause followed. No praise. But something important happened. Authority was shared, not feared. Afterward, she admitted to the human man that her hands had shaken the entire time. He told her courage was not the absence of fear, but action taken while fear existed. She said humans repeated that idea often. She finally understood why. As weeks passed, the settlement adjusted again. Not everyone embraced the change. Some resisted quietly, some openly, but fewer could deny reality. The alien woman was not dangerous. She was not a symbol. She was a person with limits, patience, and flaws. That realization unsettled many more than fear ever had. The human man faced his own struggles. Standing beside her had changed how others treated him. Some respected him more. Others distanced themselves. A few accused him of choosing sides. One person asked him why he cared so much. He answered simply. He said because indifference allowed fear to grow. That night, he questioned himself more deeply than before. He wondered if his involvement had shaped her path too strongly, if he had influenced choices she should have made alone. He shared these doubts with her. She listened carefully, then said something that eased him. "You did not guide me. You walked with me until I could walk without you." Those words mattered. Soon after, she made a decision that surprised many. She requested temporary reassignment to a research zone away from the main settlement. Not as retreat, but as contribution. She wanted her work to speak where her presence still caused tension. The announcement stirred mixed reactions. Some felt relief. Others felt disappointment. A few felt guilt. The human man felt all of it at once. Before she left, they stood together near the observation window one last time for a while. She said the hardest lesson she had learned among humans was this: fear did not disappear when challenged. It adapted. It hid behind logic and caution and tradition. He said humans struggled with letting go of control. Understanding required vulnerability. She asked him if he believed the settlement would continue changing without her there. He said change was never about one person. It was about choices repeating. She nodded. She told him she did not regret coming. Even the pain had taught her something. She had learned that fear could be confronted without force. That presence alone could shift perspectives. He thanked her for trusting him. She said trust was never about certainty. It was about risk taken with awareness. When she left for the research zone, the corridors felt quieter. Not empty, but reflective. People spoke her name more openly now. Not always kindly, not always fairly, but they spoke it. The human man watched the settlement adjust without her daily presence. Some behaviors slipped back. Others held firm. The progress was uneven, imperfect, human. He realized then that this was the cost of real change. It did not move in straight lines. It required patience, memory, and willingness to feel uncomfortable. And somewhere beyond the main lights of the settlement, the alien woman worked alone, but no longer unseen. Both carried forward what they had learned. Not as heroes, not as symbols, just as individuals who chose to face fear without letting it decide everything. Time passed in a way that felt both slow and fast. The settlement continued its routines. Supplies arrived. Shifts changed. Lights dimmed and brightened on schedule. On the surface, life moved forward as it always had. But underneath, something had settled into place. The alien woman was no longer present in the main corridors. Her absence was felt in small ways. The quiet corner where she used to sit remained empty. The path she often walked stayed a little less crowded, as if people still remembered to give space, even when she was not there. Some habits fade slowly. The human man noticed that people spoke about her more openly now, not always with kindness, but with honesty. Fear had softened into discussion. Discussion had replaced silence. That alone mattered. He continued his work as before. He did not seek attention. He did not speak publicly about what had happened. He understood that real change did not need announcements. It needed consistency. Sometimes people approached him privately. They asked questions they would not have dared to ask before. What was she really like? Was she dangerous? Did she hate humans for how she had been treated? He answered calmly. He said she was careful, thoughtful, tired at times. He said she was not defined by fear, theirs or her own. Some listened. Some did not. But the questions kept coming, and that meant fear was no longer absolute. From the research zone, she sent occasional reports. They were professional and precise. Her work spoke clearly. Systems improved. Safety margins increased. Her contribution became difficult to ignore at first. Her messages were brief and formal. Over time, they included small personal notes, observations about silence, about working without being watched, about thinking more clearly when fear was no longer present in the room. The human man read every message carefully. He replied without urgency, without expectation. Their connection no longer depended on proximity. It depended on respect. One cycle. An unexpected situation arose in the settlement. A supply delay caused stress. Resources tightened temporarily. Old fears stirred again. People became sharp with one another. Suspicion crept back into conversations. The human man recognized the signs. He had seen this before. Stress did not create fear. It revealed where fear already lived. During a public meeting, someone mentioned the alien woman indirectly. They questioned whether reliance on her research had made the settlement vulnerable. The room grew tense. The human man listened quietly. When he spoke, his voice was steady. He said blame was easy when pressure rose. He said fear looked for familiar targets. He said the data spoke for itself, and ignoring the truth would not protect anyone. There was no argument after that. Not because everyone agreed, but because the words landed where they needed to. Later, A few people thanked him quietly. Others avoided him. Both reactions felt familiar. That night, he stood by the observation window alone. The stars looked the same as they always had. Vast, indifferent, honest, he thought about how fear had shaped the settlement long before she arrived. How easily people believed stories instead of watching actions. How often humans chose comfort over understanding. He realized something important. The story was never about an alien woman and a fearless human. It was about choice. Every day, small and repeated. Weeks later, she returned to the settlement briefly for a scheduled review. There was no announcement, no escort. She walked through the corridors calmly, as she always had. The difference was noticeable. People did not scatter. Some stepped aside respectfully. A few nodded. One person offered assistance without hesitation. She noticed everything. When she met the human man again, there was no dramatic reunion. They stood near each other, comfortable in silence. That silence felt different now. Not heavy. Not guarded. She said the settlement felt quieter. He said perhaps people were listening more. They walked together for a while. Not because they needed to, but because they chose to. She told him that working away from the settlement had helped her understand herself better. Without constant fear directed at her, she had confronted her own habits. The way she anticipated rejection. The way she braced for conflict that never came. He said humans did the same. They carried old fears into new spaces. She asked him if he ever regretted getting involved. He answered honestly. He said some days were difficult. Some days he felt isolated. But he did not regret choosing understanding over comfort. She nodded. She said regret came from acting against one's values, not from facing difficulty. Before she left again, they shared one more quiet moment near the window. She said something that stayed with him. Fear wanted me to believe I was alone. Your presence proved I was not invisible. He replied that her willingness to stay calm had taught him something too. He said strength did not always look loud or forceful. Sometimes it looked like patience. After she returned to the research zone, the settlement continued evolving. Not perfectly, not smoothly, but steadily. New arrivals heard fewer warnings. Children asked curious questions instead of fearful ones. Training programs included discussions about bias and assumption. Not because of policy, but because people had learned the cost of silence. The human man became less central over time, and that felt right. Change no longer depended on him standing nearby. Others had begun to make their own choices. One day, a new worker sat at the empty table without hesitation. No one reacted. The moment passed unnoticed. That was when the human man understood that something lasting had taken root. Months later, her assignment ended. She chose not to return permanently. Instead, she continued her work across different zones. Places where fear still ruled. Places where presence mattered. Before leaving for good, she sent one final message. She wrote that humans were not fearless. They were conflicted, capable of great kindness and deep fear at the same time. She wrote that change was slow, but possible, when even one person chose to look longer instead of turning away. She thanked him, not for saving her, not for defending her, but for seeing her. He read the message more than once. The settlement moved on. Stories faded. Details blurred. But behavior remained changed, and somewhere beyond the familiar lights, an alien woman continued walking into places where fear lived, not to fight it, but to exist beside it until it weakened. The human man returned to his routines. He carried no title, no recognition, only understanding. He knew now that fear never truly disappeared, but it lost its power when faced calmly, consistently, and without hatred. That was the real lesson. Not that everyone stopped being afraid, but that fear no longer decided who deserved to be seen.